My name is Anita Zabludowicz. I'm from the Zabludowicz collection. My education is quite personal because when I started, I studied fine arts, which I actually hated. I studied art history, which I actually hated, so I went into design because I love design. But somehow I think my mother was trained as an art historian, and she would take me to all the museums, and it was absolutely fascinating, and I would see everything, and I was probably well informed by her, and I already had a taste for art, because as soon as I finished in the design sector and I had to leave and bring up my babies, my first feeling was to delve right into the art world and try and learn about art, because I found that quite fascinating. And also, when I was younger, when I was brought up, there wasn't, the art was very traditional. There wasn't contemporary art, and it wasn't about the subjects of today, which is about, all the environment and economics and politics and everything around us. It was usually quite traditional and very stagnant, in my opinion, and I found that quite boring, where I found the young emerging artists so interesting, and there was so much going on, and it was very vibrant, and the artists were alive, they weren't dead, and that was very important to me. I started in my profession, I was not an art collector. I was an interior designer, project manager, executive, and this is what I did in my 20s. And I could not imagine that in my 30s I would be collecting. After my first child, I met somebody and they told me they were an art collector, and I thought this would be a really interesting profession to take on. And my husband decided this could be possible, but that I would have to research and study for 4 years before I made our first acquisition. So this is what I did, and our very first acquisition was a work by Ben Nicholson, and I bought this in Sotheby's, and I had to put up my hand and bid, and I even bid myself, because I also put in an absentee bid because I nipped off for a coffee, and then I went and bid against myself. That was my first acquisition. When we were deciding to collect at the beginning, we decided that we would collect modern British art. However, what happened was we discovered that there was a whole world out there, and my husband discovered art photography, and he immediately started buying Matthew Barney. So he ruined all my plans, and we never imagined that we would be going beyond hanging pictures on our wall in our home. And then our collecting ambitions grew, and it was a very exciting new world, and this is how it all began. Well, when we first started to collect, we also started to build our first home together, and at the same time the Tate was being built, and Vanessa Devereux, the sister of Richard Branson, introduced us to Nick Sirota, and we met Nick Sirota, and he showed us around the new Tate before it was built, and it was a building site, and we were very excited and wanted to support the Tate. And Nick realized that we were also trying to build our collection from the beginning, and he introduced us to Thomas Dane, who actually was and is the architect of the collection at the beginning. So from modern British, we quickly became collectors of art photography. Because it is my nature to look around, and I was very interested in new medias and emerging artists, and I wanted to support young artists, and I loved going to the colleges, and I loved conceptual work, and I loved the ideas, I loved digital work. and I was incredibly interested, and I loved the more ambitious works, and I wasn't really aware when I was acquiring ambitious works how conceptual they were, and they really did need a platform, and they really needed to be shown. But at the time there were not, and still are not, enough places that show emerging art, emerging talent. And I felt that there needed to be a public platform showing these works. So one day I just woke up and I suggested to Poya that we should have a space, an exhibition space in London, to be able to show these works. And he agreed this was a good idea. So this is how it began. The idea began, and then it became a reality a few months later when we found the correct space. Well, for us, we didn't want to have a white space. It was very important that we didn't have the white space, and it was very important that we had a 3D experience. And we felt this is the future of museums and institutions. People just don't like just to walk into a place that just has objects or paintings on the wall. They want experiences now. They need performance, they need digital, they need to be immersed, they need education, they need entertainment. So this is the future of the museum, and this is why families and people go visit museums. They go for the full-on experience. So we felt that was also a very important part of how we show art in itself. So we don't just look at a space as a white cube. We look at it as a fully immersive experience, and that the artist is actually creating that 3D experience rather than the actual curator who might be just putting paintings on a wall. And so we look at it, we're very creative. We're always trying to create something new, and we're moving forward. For instance, we just created the first 360-degree VR space where every month we show another VR experience, and we were probably the first to show VR in 2015, and now we're looking at AR and many other mediums that are emerging in the technical world. We try to move with technology as well, because for us, the artists have another form of making art, another medium. It's not just the paintbrush anymore. It goes beyond that to many other mediums, and anything goes. So one of the most important fields in the collecting of what we do today is digital art, and we started collecting digital in 1999. But what I found was that digital artists don't get out there so well, because it's not, there's no market really, not much of a market. It's more institutional, it's not really bought by individual collectors, and it's a difficult media, and it's difficult for artists to continue their practices and create a good living. So we felt that we needed to give them some form of platform that would help them. So we created this data editions platform, which is a e-commerce, but it's a business platform. But what it does is it allows, we've managed to this date to commission 350 artworks with about 80 artists, and it's been a very successful project. And a lot of institutions have bought the work, and collectors from all over the world, because it's online and digital. And we've created some wonderful projects also with David Grin, and we've managed to create lectures and performances, and I think this has really helped. It's another way in helping another art media that is not really very marketable. How do I discover artists? There's so many different examples of how I discover artists. I mean, one way was, of course, when I met Thomas Dane back in the 90s, and he introduced me to Wolfgang Tillman, and immediately we fell in love with Wolfgang, and we felt that the Tate should also acquire some of Wolfgang's work, and we helped them do this. And We acquired also some great works for the collection right at the beginning of our collecting. We recognized already he was doing something great. I always looked for artists who were doing something that I'd never seen before. I didn't have the greatest knowledge, of course, of art history, but I did with the best with what I knew, and I went for advice to many people to ask and see what their opinion, and often I ignored their opinions too. Well, I was a trustee for 15 years of the Camden Art Centre, which was really wonderful, and that was a great experience, and it taught me so much. I worked with this lady, Jenny Lomax, and she really taught me so much, and this actually helped me to create our own foundation, or our own space, exhibition space, Zabludowicz collection. It's a fine, fine, fine institute, Camden Art Centre, and time tells the story because it's been very successful and shown some of the greatest artists in the world. And then I'm a trustee of the Tate, which has been a wonderful experience, and I've been a trustee with many wonderful people, and it's been lovely to see the progress. We've always supported the institutions. Usually I support them with different projects, and we do projects together. We're working at the moment with New Museum on a project in VR. We are always working with different museums in all different creative ways. We don't actually give fellowships as many. We do one or two burses in certain colleges, etc. But that's also, it might not even be involved in art. But what we do is we offer artist residencies. We give them the chance to be able to show their work publicly. And we were working a lot with University of Arts. And we also have an educational program called Testing Ground, where one of the programs is we bring in the MFA curatorial students, and they create shows, and they have a whole educational experience, and it's part of their MA and MFA courses. So it works really well, and that's been very successful. And we also do master classes where we invite artists who want to move on and improve what they're doing, and then we invite more well-known and more experienced artists to come in and show them and lecture to them and spend time with them. And it's a whole wonderful process which takes a couple of weeks, and it's quite fascinating, which usually involves 4 or 5 top artists giving lectures, and then they also give classes as well to these students, and it's been really a successful project. If it's a young project, we will look at it, but most of the time it will be discarded if they come to us. We usually come to them, and we approach young projects ourselves, and we work with them, and we know when we can or we can't, and then we start the process, and usually it's very successful. The gallerists, I have different relationships because it's really sad, because I work with a lot of galleries working with emerging art, and emerging artists are unfortunately, some of them survive, some of them don't. And artists who show emerging galleries also the same. Some of the galleries survive, some of them don't. So I've seen many galleries come and go, and I've done my best to support them and the artists, but it's been very difficult. But the artists who have survived, it's been wonderful, and our relationship has continued, and they've become established artists. And usually the artists that they take care of have survived too, and I've continued to support those artists, and it's been a really great relationship to this day. My relationships was mainly with the artists and the galleries, not so much with the institutions, as the institutions never really wanted to work with me sort of in an institutional way. They wanted me more as a supporter of just a cold supporter. So I think things are changing now, and they understand that not every person who is philanthropic wants to support in the same way. So now they realize this, and they start to open up a little bit more. That we're talking about my country, maybe not in America, but it's a bit different here. I think the future is also definitely about screens in the future, and also about augmented reality. And I feel that as a human being, as you're walking in the street, you know, you see what you see, but I think there'll be other dimensions, and therefore that will involve artworks, just like you see public artworks. You see statues in the middle of a beautiful public space. You will also see 3D immersions of video, and you'd see augmented reality of different ways of seeing things, and that's how I see the future. I think it'll also be, as well as inside the museums, which also will be a 3D immersive experiences as well as real and not real. There will also be that more and more in the streets around the world.